The comments and statements made within the show are the opinions of the commentators and their guests, have not been evaluated by the FDA, and are in no way attempt to diagnose, treat, mitigate, cure, or prevent any disease or illness. The contents of the show are not to be construed as medical advice. If you have a health condition or health concern, please contact a licensed, qualified healthcare practitioner.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nan.
And I'm Tom. And this is a Supplement Super Sleuth.
That'll be me. And the Herbal Storyteller.
And that definitely would be me. And together, we're going to take a peek behind the curtain of the natural products industry.
We'll be sharing naturals in the news, dispelling lots of myths, interviewing key players in the industry, and highlighting our favorite herbs and supplements.
So with that, let's pull back that curtain and see what's there.
And here we go again.
Oh, goodness. So,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm doing very well.
You know what?
Yeah.
This is episode number 26. 26.
Yeah.
Which means it's the end of 2022.
Yep. We are probably releasing this one. I think you and I had that discussion. It's going to come out maybe the day or two before Christmas. So
yeah.
If anybody watches
happy holidays to everyone.
Yeah,
happy end of the year. Right.
Thank you. It's like if anybody watches this, just consider this our shortened version of our little stocking stuffer for you.
Oh yeah, we're just gonna concentrate on naturals in the news today, and kind of have an extended version of that, and just have open discussion. So it's open mic.
And the opinions stated by the two talk show hosts here have nothing to do with the broadcasting company who is providing this. They have nothing to do. There are opinions only. Please understand that we can, having been in this industry for as long as we have collectively and individually, we do have points of view that sometimes can be a little bit,
edgy,
suspicious of the way this industry gets treated.
So I think it's just really interesting because, there it is. We played the whole song.
That's right. For those of you who wondered, how does this song end?
I know. We never usually do. And I thought, it's the end of the year. Let's play the whole song. And let's just have some fun today. We'll just have basically an open conversation about stuff that we've been talking about all year long. And we are definitely going to charge it up for 2023. Right out of the gates, we'll have naturals in the news, and we'll have our favorite things for 2023. I think that's the first week of January, but happy holidays to everyone. And we just want to also express our extreme gratitude
very much
for your listenership. We really enjoy doing these, and they're really an opportunity for us to just sort of talk about so much that's going on with natural health and healing and herbal remedies and nutraceuticals. It's been in our blood for decades, and
more than decades. I mean, between the two of us, I think we could clock in at almost a century mark.
So we just, in my practice, it's, I don't really have big discussions about this stuff, but, you and I often, throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. But, there's herbs of commerce, and then there's herbalism, and that's a completely different thing. A lot of people, herbs of commerce are like turmeric and bacopa and
herbs of commerce are the herbs that have suddenly become the new darlings of people who are looking to, they're dissatisfied, quite honestly, with what they've been given as far as pharmaceuticals to cure, treat, or mitigate a disease. And pharmaceuticals are the only thing that is legally licensed to say they can cure, treat, or mitigate a disease. So, it's left to the MDs, and no offense to any MD out there. We recognize how hard you study and everything.
Well, in truth, I don't ever want I don't ever want that responsibility, because there's so many factors into going into someone's ability to resolve health issues. There's diet, there's
There's
exercise, there's
genetics.
sunlight, there's genetics, there's sleep, there's stressors, and I've seen wild things in my practice. And I have one wonderful client who in his 50s developed type 1, not type 2, type 1 diabetes from stress. I mean, extreme stress, more, I would say, more an abusive work situation over decades. And that kind of extreme stress changes your physiology. So I certainly don't want the pressure of saying this herb or these herbs or this formula or do this program and you'll get better, because I don't know the extenuating circumstances of anyone's health and well-being. And I think that's too big of a responsibility. But I certainly want it understood that the danger inherent in spice herbs and foods, superfoods, is low. It's minimal. I mean, yes, Tom and I were just kind of, talking about what we're going to cover today. And he said, yeah, you can die from a strawberry too. And he is absolutely right. People can have anaphylaxis from eating strawberries. So what, where do you go in that?
Yeah,
we
exactly.
still want the opportunity on our podcast to be able to say, hey, these are wonderful, but absolutely check with your herbalist or your chiropractor or your naturopath or your your integrative health physician or whoever you're seeing. Make sure you connect with a professional who really knows what they're doing. So
yeah, and interestingly enough, now I just got back from maybe 3 weeks ago now, and we had an interview with the head of the American Herbalist Guild, Mimi Hernandez. And the American Herbalist Guild is a true European guild type group that regulates and reviews and actually wants to see evidence that their members, when they receive that designation, RHAHG, registered herbalist from the American Herbalist Guild, that they've treated X number of cases, that they present those case, studies and show the rationale of why they used the herbs they used or why they used the treatments they used and what the outcomes were and so on. So, people have this idea very strongly implanted by, certain individuals or corporations that make huge amounts of money, saying that herbs don't work or herbs are dangerous. And sometimes what we try to do is we try to present the opposite point of view, that no, herbs are very safe. When you stop and think about the incidents, again, like I was, kind of facetiously talking about the strawberry or a bee sting, like, okay, let's eliminate every honeybee because somebody died of a bee sting. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Or,
Right.
Food allergies are things like that. The other problem that I have is, that when everything goes down to a point of being a commercial product. So that's the idea behind herbs of commerce. They're commercial products. There are herbs that are commonly being sold. And what's interesting right now with COVID and supply chain issues and, just the way everything happens to have played out over the last 2.5 years, a lot of these herbs of commerce have become very hard to get because they're either in great demand or the workers that were, growing them, harvesting them, drying them, treating them, preparing them, they've all suffered. Excuse me, it's early in the morning here, so sometimes I have a little bit of morning throat going on, but that's just me. What I was driving at is the fact that herbs have been used, and the World Health Organization has recognized herbal medicine and herbs as one of the major sources of healthcare for people in the world. It has not yet been supplanted by, yes, there's a pharmacy in every village in Africa, and therefore what's the need of herbal medicine? Or there's a pharmacy in every little, everywhere. And so you just walk into the pharmacy and the pharmacy treats you exactly the fascinating thing to me about Nan's clinic, again, is having watched her in action, is that every person is an individual. So every person gets treated individually. And that's how both she and I were trained by our teacher, the teachers Michael and Leslie Tierra from the East-West School of Herb Studies, studying both Ayurveda and traditional Chinese and Western herbalism. Every training they gave us was you look at the person. You look at the person. You don't just say, oh, they have this disease, and so anybody who has this disease gets treated this way. And that's the interesting part.
That's true.
That to me,
it's taken case by case.
That's the personal part that to me has always attracted me to herbal modalities, is the fact that it is very personal. So some of the things we're going to talk about today are, we're going to dive into them a little bit. We're going to have some fun today, because
we have some fun, and
it raises questions, and I'm not saying that my response here is going to be absolutely correct, believe me, and then throw out everything else. But what I am saying is use your intelligence, think about these things, understand that there are people who've spent their lives studying this, and there are, one article, and we'll get to it. So why don't we just launch into it, Nan?
Yeah,
I'll get off my soapbox here.
I don't know. We can soapbox that's what a podcast is, as a type of,
it's a digital
standing in. It's a digital soapbox, right? So Naturals in the News, episode 26. The first headline is September 13th, 2022. Twice daily nasal irrigation reduces COVID-related illness and death, by Medical College of Georgia at Augusta University. So I love this, and I'm going to talk about why I love this, but it's fascinating to me. Starting twice daily flushing of the mucus line nasal cavity with a mild saline solution soon after testing positive for COVID can significantly reduce hospitalization and death, investigators report. They say the technique that can be used at home by mixing half teaspoon each of salt and baking soda in a cup of boiled or distilled water, then putting it into a sinus rinse bottle is a safe, effective, and inexpensive way to reduce the risk of severe illness and death from coronavirus infection that could have a vital public health impact. What we say in the emergency room and surgery is the solution to pollution is dilution. Dr. Amy Baxter, emergency medicine physician at Medical College of Georgia at Augusta University and corresponding author of the study in Ear, Nose, and Throat Journal. By giving extra hydration to your sinuses, it makes them function better. If you have a contaminant, the more you flush it out, the better you're able to get rid of dust, dirt, viruses, and anything else, says Baxter. We found an 8.5-fold reduction in hospitalization and no fatalities compared to our controls, said senior author Dr. Richard Schwartz, chair of the MCG Department of Emergency Medicine. Both of those are significant endpoints. The study appears to be the largest prospective clinical trial of its kind, and the older high-risk population they studied, many of whom had pre-existing conditions like obesity, hypertension, diabetes, may benefit most from the easy, inexpensive practice, the investigators say. They found that less than 1.3% of the 79 study subjects aged 55 and older who enrolled within 24 hours of testing positive for COVID-19 between September 24th and December 21st, 2020, experienced hospitalization. No one died. Among the participants who were treated at MCG and the health system followed for 28 days, one participant was admitted to the hospital and another went to the emergency room but was not admitted. By comparison, 9.47% of patients were hospitalized and 1.5% died in a group with similar demographics reported by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention during the same time frame and began about 9 months after SARS-CoV-2 first surfaced in the United States. The reduction from 11% to 1.3% as of November 2021 would have corresponded in absolute terms in over 1 million fewer older Americans requiring admission, they write. If confirmed in other studies, the potential reduction in morbidity and mortality worldwide could be profound. So what's really interesting is that these physicians in this emergency room was trying to figure out a home remedy to kind of reduce the impact in hospitalization and death in Augusta. And they managed it with just a little bit of saline and baking soda sprayed into the nose. And we can go even farther with that. And in my practice, I often recommend to people that they can use other different kinds of sprays, to saline based sprays. So this one is called X Clear. I love this. This actually has research on it. X Clear benefits, alleviates congestion, which it does, gently cleans, soothes, and moisturizes, washes away pollutants, irritants, and airborne contaminants, fast and natural release, reduction of bacteria, S. pneumoniae, H. influenzae, and M. catarrhalis. And those significantly reduce by nearly 40% on all three of those bacteria, a 35% increase in airflow just from spraying your nose a couple times a day. Now, X Clear is xylitol and saline, and now makes a solution, a nasal mist that has erythritol, sea salt, which is a saline solution, a little tiny bit of thyme, and peppermint, which actually helps open the sinuses too. Spearmint and tea tree oil with a little bit of wintergreen leaf. It is wonderful. I really like both of them. They work great. And the xylitol and erythritol do really interesting things. They're types of sugars that heal, and they can coat the outside of the mucous membranes and make them slippery so things can't adhere to the mucous membranes of the sinuses, the nose, and the back of the throat into the oral cavity.
And remember,
So,
that's where the bacteria really likes to establish and start to grow. You bring something in, and it's now in a very rich food environment that it says, "Hey, let's set up shop. Let's set up home."
But it's the same with pollens too. I mean, pollens can get in there and cause a lot of irritation. Bacteria, viruses, and fungi can get in there and cause enormous amounts of swelling and irritation. And people who really struggle with their sinuses, there's nothing like just snorting some saline. Saline solution. And I I'm a big one for this. And we're a little weird in the United States. We don't, other than our mouth, we don't like putting things in our orifices, ears, nose, and other places. Armpits,
Q-tips
whatever.
in the ears. That's all we put in the ears is Q-tips, and that can cause damage. So ban the Q-tip.
But it's interesting what a little saline solution and a well-positioned herbal formula can do to really just reduce outcomes of advancement of upper respiratory issues. And if you're not carrying one in your pocket, or you don't have one around, or you don't have it in the kitchen or in the bathroom where you go, start to get in the habit of making you can make it at home. Make some saline solution and a little baking soda and put it in distilled water and put it in a nasal a little nasal squeeze bottle. You can do it yourself, or you can get one of these really well formulated nasal sprays. They work great, and you can get it anywhere, and it really does help. It really does reduce that impact that happens, from collecting all kinds of things when you breathe in the air.
Yeah, right. So, what it's doing is it's basically your sinuses have become your Petri dish.
Yes.
And if you're into yoga, if you've been familiar with any of that, about nasal irrigation because it's called nasya.
Yeah.
And so you do a neti pot.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of a neti pot is the same thing, to rinse out and clean the sinuses. So I really like that little ditty of a poem. The solution to the pollution is dilution.
Is dilution, right? And Dr. Baxter actually went on to say they knew that the virus was present in the body. The worse the impact, from it just starts in the nasal systems, right?
Yeah.
That was the whole thing, cover your nose and mouth. But one of the thoughts was, if we can rinse out, this is Dr. Baxter saying, some of the virus within 24 hours of the person testing positive, maybe we can lower the severity of the whole trajectory of coronavirus, reducing the likelihood that the virus will get into the lungs and do permanent lethal damage. And now the infamous spiky SARS-CoV-2 is known to attach to ACE2 receptors. That's pervasive throughout the body in abundance, but mostly the nasal cavity, the mouth, and lungs. So if you start rinsing the nasal cavity and make those receptor sites, just keep rinsing those receptor sites, again, it reduces that exposure to those tissues, that's where the virus really clings to, it gets in, and it starts replicating. So they did find, and the research is really great to know that you can just reduce it. They're not saying make it go away forever. That's not what it is, but it also had an impact on reducing the severity of loss of taste and smell. So a lot of people who had long haul COVID, one of the things that they say is, I really would love it if my smell and taste could be returned. And people who did nasal irrigation had less likelihood of having those particular kinds of symptoms. So I think it's really important. It's definitely something.
And it's once you get used to it, at first when you do it, especially if you're putting something, if you're putting something like mint up your nose, it's going to feel different. It's not going to feel normal. So it's definitely going to wake you up. It's going to do some other things. But when you get used to it, it actually is wonderful to suddenly realize, because you'll spray it. And
that was
it'll
easy.
be up there.
You'll spray it and you'll say, "Oh, that was easy."
Yeah. And it'll be up there for a while, and then all of a sudden you'll have a drainage. And you'll maybe you'll have the urge, I need to blow my nose. And you'll get all of this mucus that'll be coming out that was up there, that was sort of trapped. It was just going to be there and dry out, or, hang there in really, viscous situation. Yeah. And it just suddenly drains out, and all of a sudden you're breathing through both nostrils. And
it's wonderful.
It's a really great thing. So,
and you didn't have to ingest anything.
Yeah.
And that includes herbs, right?
Yeah.
And while we're on the subject of coronavirus, COVID-19 and COVID-2 and whatever else we've decided to call it, I do want to share this one article that Tom and I found that was really exciting. Again,
and remember, we're not claiming cure.
We're not claiming cure. This isn't about cure. This is all about supporting you if you're, in a situation. But one of those herbs of commerce for kind of supporting people with viral infection is called olive leaves. And this is ahead of print, but this was a beautifully structured clinical trial. It was a randomized triple-blinded clinical trial. And it was, so it's about to be published, and it has a PubMed ID number, but basically it said efficacy of olive leaf extract on the outcomes of hospitalized COVID-19 patients, this randomized triple-blinded clinical trial. They wanted to test olive leaf extract taken orally on patients that were had already been hospitalized. And this was a triple-blinded clinical trial. It was conducted on hospitalized COVID-19 patients using what's called block randomization. They received olive leaf extract, 250 milligrams every 12 hours for 5 days. That was the intervention A. Intervention B received 500 milligrams every 12 hours for 5 days, and the control group received a placebo. So we have one group that got 250 milligram, another group that got 500 milligrams. They, every 12 hours, so twice a day for 5 days, they were given olive leaf in different potencies. Of the 150 randomized patients into groups, 141 completed the follow-ups, and they were analyzed. On the 5th day of hospitalization, body temperature, pulse rate, respiratory rate, C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker in the cardiovascular system, of the intervention group were significantly lower than the control group. And furthermore, body temperature, pulse rate, respiratory rate, and C-reactive protein of the B group were significantly lower than the control group, and their oxygen saturation was significantly higher than all groups. So that 500 milligram was a sweet spot. It not only reduced body temperature and pulse rate and kind of created what we would call homeostatic mechanisms, reduced that C-reactive protein, which is cardiovascular marker, but it also increased oxygen. So that extra 250 milligrams of the extract really did something a little bit more. And in the conclusion, olive leaf extract can improve the clinical status of patients and decrease length of hospitalization. So it was a beautiful study. It's ahead of print. I can't wait to read all of it, but it was olive extract focused on oleorubin, which is one of the constituents that's found to be very active. So, for those of you who are still sort of in a, what are we doing about coronavirus and what are we doing about SARS-CoV-2? There's definitely research going on with potency. Yeah. Oh, and it's ongoing in the natural products industry. And again, not as a cure, but as support for people who know that it's not going away. It's here to stay. And talk to your herbalist or naturopath or a chiropractor, or your nutritionist or your integrative medical doctor about recommendations for you personally. So.
Yeah. So, and basically what we're talking about is supporting the body's own process of dealing with some of the side effects, some of the responses that your body creates in response to trying to throw off the virus or deal with the things that the virus can do. So this is not saying, okay, olive leaf is an antiviral, take olive leaf as an antiviral. Not at all. Not at all. And so people's decisions on whether they become vaccinated or don't become vaccinated has nothing to do with this discussion, because we all know now that even if you're vaccinated, you can still get what they call a breakthrough infection. So
you can get a breakthrough.
Having adjunct therapies that you can use is something that's very, very important. And that's going to bring up, I think, the discussion that I'm going to have first here is something that was in the New York Times. It's been in many other places too, because all of these news agencies they've got people like us who are out there researching, trying to find a news article that would be newsworthy. And this one is definitely, it's from the New York Times. It was the 25th of October under the wellness section and living. And it's basically, do statins increase the risk of diabetes? Now, most of us know that a statin is something it's a drug. It's a compound that is taken in order to reduce cholesterol and to reduce the effects, especially of LDL, the low density lipoprotein that can accumulate in the arteries and the veins of the body and start to block circulation and can be very dangerous. And so, there's good reason for research continually to go on as far as what we can do to help protect ourselves. And then obviously from an herbalist point of view, from a naturopathic doctor's point of view, from, integrative physician's point of view, a lot of that is going to deal with what's your diet, what's your lifestyle, like Nan was saying, what is your stress level? Because if severe stress can literally create something that didn't exist before, that is normally identified, type 1 diabetes, as something you're born with.
Right.
And so therefore, it's like you have type diabetes when you were born. And normally everybody says, okay, what you do develop is type 2 diabetes, which is not the insulin. It's what they call non-insulin dependent diabetes, where you don't need to take an insulin shot. And so they're worried, do the statins increase the risk of diabetes? And what they found, interestingly enough, is that very many people had an increased risk of type 2 diabetes when they were taking statins. So, it's a real concern. It doesn't mean you should automatically avoid statins just because they're now creating or have discovered this link between taking statins and type 2 diabetes. But basically, originally researchers thought that if I take a statin, one of the things it's going to do is it's going to lower the inflammatory process within the body because that LDL, that accumulation of that low density lipoprotein, can cause inflammatory response in the veins, in the cardiovascular system. So they were thinking, well, this is great. Statins will lower that inflammatory response, and therefore it's going to actually be good. But, what they found is that it's the liver that is partially responsible, in fact, very largely responsible for releasing glucose into the bloodstream. And the pancreas is responsible for creating the insulin that tells the cells, hey, there's blood sugar, there's glucose in the bloodstream. Open up, you need those as primary fuel to burn in the mitochondria to create the energy from something called the Krebs cycle, which we won't get into, but it's all of these beautiful little
Right.
compounds that are needed by the body in order to create the energy that every cell needs, the mitochondria of the cell, in order to produce the energy that the mitochondria. So think of your muscle as having millions of little mitochondrial cells, because how many cells are in each muscle? You've got millions of cells, and within each one of those cells is the mitochondria.
Little batteries.
The battery. And so each of those little batteries are creating, it's more like an energy factory. It's literally creating energy out of what we take in from our diet and so on.
Yeah.
And what they found is that, they found that, and I'll read it to you because it's easier to
read it.
Yeah, they found
just read it.
that older, healthy adults, and this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was a trial published in 2008, that older, healthy adults who were given 20 milligrams of a rosuvastatin, which is, I think sold under Crestor, each day were more likely to develop diabetes after about 2 years than those who were given a placebo. That's an interesting study. So, there's a Dr. Jill Crandall in the article who's quoted as saying there was a sense that maybe statins would reduce the risk of diabetes. In the end, we saw something completely different. Several other analyses have confirmed a link between statins and diabetes risk, but the cause is still a mystery. They've suggested that statins might make cells more resistant to insulin, and that in turn makes it less and less, easy for the body to create the energy that it needs. And what happens there is really interesting. You get a demand from the body saying, I need more glucose. I need more fuel.
I need energy.
Yeah. If you're driving a race car and you're running out of gas, you're not going to be doing so well. The car starts sputtering and everything. It's like, I'm running out of fuel. The same thing is true with all of the cells in your body. And so if you've got something that blocks that insulin, that's called insulin resistance. And that is the classic definition of type 2 diabetes. It's insulin resistant diabetes, not insulin dependent diabetes.
Exactly.
So you don't take shots for it, but you really have to look at your diet and everything else you do in order to make sure that you are not developing a deeper, entrance into insulin insufficiency where your body's not recognizing insulin. And so that's what they're thinking, is that statins now could have that possibility of blocking, your insulin receptors and so your body then will develop a type 2 diabetes.
But we also do know that statins block the utilization of CoQ10 or coenzyme Q10, and that's highly problematic too.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But it basically, so to read further, while all statins can have this effect, it's most commonly seen in moderate to high intensity doses. So that would be like 40 to 80 milligrams a day of Lipitor or 20 to 40 milligrams of Crestor. Those are high doses. But unfortunately, a lot of times people will get those high doses because their cholesterol is so out of control because of their diet. And again, this is where diet really is, like Nan and I are constantly talking about, the old adage of let medicine be thy, let food be thy medicine.
Medicine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they say there's about a 9% risk with people who are doing statin therapy of actually developing diabetes. And so you think, okay, 9%, that's not too bad. But if there are, 100 million people in the country who are taking statins and 9% of those people could develop diabetes, that 9% of 100 million.
It's significant.
Yeah, it's significant. It's significant. So it is definitely something to think about.
And it's also the opposite of what they originally thought. The researchers originally thought about statins. They thought statins, because they're reducing cholesterol, were also going to reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes or insulin resistant diabetes. And that's not what happened. Something else happened.
Yeah,
and so that's what's interesting here is, and again, I really appreciate researchers who are willing to go out on a limb and say, yeah, not
Not,
what
yeah,
we
it's
thought.
not all it's not all roses and ribbons.
Mm, right.
So it's, does it mean don't take statins? No, it doesn't mean don't take statins, but it does mean because if you have a severe cholesterol problem, you really need to handle that. Now there are,
Yeah.
and at some point further in one of our shows, we'll talk about things like Google from the Ayurvedic tradition, which has been tested against statins and shown to be as effective as at reducing cholesterol as the statins without those, one of the side effects that Nancy just mentioned. And that's what I'm going to segue into next here is there was a study done. In fact, many studies have been done, and this study was done back in the I think it was 2011, something like that. The coenzyme Q10 and statin-induced mitochondrial dysfunction. Again, this is something that they know is happening. They can't quite pin it down completely yet. This is a very large study done on all of the other studies that have been done on this particular issue, showing that. So it was a group study of looking at all of the different studies done on it, and what they found is that, as you may know, CoQ10 is one of those compounds in the body that's essential in that Krebs energy cycle that I mentioned a little bit earlier. If you think of it as like the way I used to describe it when that was actually a car, was the Wankel engine was part of like the Mazda car phenomenon of, instead of having pistons, it had something that spun around, and was being fired, and it was sort of actually modified or designed off of the way the mitochondria produce energy using all of these different compounds. And you've just got this little, it's kind of a geeky thing, so I won't get into it too deeply, but suffice it to say that CoQ10 is one of the key linchpins of that energy production cycle, the Krebs cycle within the body. And so when you're taking statins, to have that reduced can be quite problematic. Now, when it gets into the point where they know that CoQ10 is not produced as efficiently or as abundantly in aging individuals as it is in young people, it becomes even more of a problem. So
Yes.
even if you decide, okay, well, I am at risk, so I need to take statins, the prudent thing to be doing would be to take CoQ10. Now, the interesting thing is that when they did their studies, they were using 300 milligrams of CoQ10 for individuals and showing that it was helping with their muscle recovery. They were using athletes who were really pushing themselves, and they could show that CoQ10 was actually helping them in their recovery. It was helping them with the way their body was processing the sugars.
That's a high dose, very expensive.
Yes. And so that's a very high dose. And
It is.
interestingly enough, it's because CoQ10 is not as available in the diet. And, but what they found is there is a coenzyme factor of CoQ10 called ubiquinol.
Ubiquinol.
And ubiquinol.
With an OL instead of ubiquinone.
Yeah.
With an NONE.
Yeah. So ubiquinol is found to be, it enters the bloodstream much more easily. It actually stays in the bloodstream longer. Yeah. And it's something that, if you're looking at what's more efficient for me, especially if you're over 50, my suggestion, which is what I do for myself, is look at the ubiquinone and say, well, I don't know if I want ubiquinone because that's the harder to assimilate CoQ10. But if I want ubiquinol,
exactly.
And, not making a plug for Costco, but you can go to Costco and buy bottles of liquid ubiquinol. That is great. You can take 100 milligrams of that, and you're going to get much more bang.
You're really going to feel a difference, especially if you're in that over 50 age group.
And over 70 is even more important.
Even more, you really notice it. Yeah.
So yes, statins can increase, the survey says statins can increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. Diet and lifestyle can do a lot to offset that potential. And if you are concerned, make sure you're talking to a practitioner who understands these and what could be done to help offset that risk, so that if you are taking statins, you're also offsetting the risk. Also be aware of the fact that if you are taking statins, it is a very prudent idea to be taking CoQ10.
Oh, yeah.
Especially
University of Texas A&M did a battery of studies over, I think it was a decade. They were extraordinary. I remember reading every last single one of them on CoQ10 and surviving, heart failure, cardiac arrest, and heart failure. And it was extraordinary what they found with CoQ10. And they used ubiquinol in those studies, and it was unbelievable. So important to spare your heart.
Yeah, and that and so this is just this is a corollary, and this is a what if. This is the herbal storyteller saying, going, what if?
And what if?
And so because we know that there's a lot of research now into myocardial and myocarditis and myocardial problems that might be caused by long COVID or by exposure to COVID. And some of that research on the ubiquinol and on the CoQ10, the ubiquinol form of CoQ10, is all around the energy production in the mitochondria of the heart.
Yeah.
And so it's very, very important to keep your heart energized, to keep your heart moving the way it should. I mean, it's the primary organ that you have. It's literally, in Chinese medicine, it's called the emperor.
The emperor.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the emperor needs to
Beautiful.
be taken care of. So that's my little piece on statins.
Oh, I love it. I'm so glad you brought it up. It's a great conversation, which I'm sure will continue in the future. Okay, another headline for Naturals in the News, because we're doing an extended Naturals in the News today. We found this this is the season. It's the holiday season, and people love their sweets and their cookies and their pies, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's holidays, right? As long as you're not doing it every day, every week of the year. But
every hour.
This is really interesting, because a lot of people today have pretty much said that all sugars are bad for you and we need to find substitute sugars. And I don't know, sugar, natural raw whole sugar and honey, which is a whole superfood, that's a different thing. And we do need the taste of sweet in small amounts. It's part of the elements of our body, and it's part of how we build our bodies. But we have a tendency to overdo sweet in the United States, and most people agree with that. But now there's this new study. The headlines were pretty funny. Horrifying new study indicates that popular sugar substitutes worsen your memory. So I do want to talk about that, because a lot of people who are in the natural products industry do know that fake sugars, we call them fake sugars, can contribute to dementia, maybe even Alzheimer's. But they really looked at quite a few sugar substitutes, and one of them, what Tom and I had a really interesting conversation around it. So I just want to read some of the headline and read some of the research that was done. And then we do want to kind of discuss it, since a lot of you probably take in foods that are now sweetened with stevia or a sulfame K. We see a sulfame K as a fake sweetener in sports nutrition powders. And I do want to talk about that. But using laboratory models, scientists discovered that ingesting FDA-approved levels of saccharin, sulfame K, and highly purified stevia, which is not stevia, we're going to talk about that in a minute, early in life may result in many changes to the body, including brain areas linked to memory and reward-motivated behavior. Early life high sugar diets have been linked to impaired brain function. But what about low-calorie sugar substitutes? According to recent research, they could have a negative impact on the developing gut and brain. Researchers from the University of Southern California, Dornsife College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences report that adolescents who consume the low-calorie sweeteners saccharin, sulfame K, and highly purified stevia, which is not the whole stevia plant, okay, I need to make that distinction, showed long-term memory impairments in a study that was recently published in the journal of JCI Insight. The results are consistent with other studies that demonstrated sustained memory impairment in adolescent rats who consume sugar. Consuming low-calorie to no-calorie sweeteners also affected metabolic signaling in the body, which can lead to diabetes and other metabolic-related diseases. Rats that ate low-calorie sweeteners as adolescents were less inclined to work for sugar as adults, but they ate more sugar if it was accessible, which is another factor that may influence the chance of developing metabolic diseases. Diet soft drinks that use low-calorie sugar substitutes, such as stevia and sulfame K, might have long-term effects on memory, behavior, and metabolic function. So why it matters. There's a broad range of advice on what to eat and when to consume it. According to the researchers, information from studies like these may aid consumers and medical professionals in making better decisions at all stages of growth in the life of humans. While our findings do not necessarily indicate that someone should not consume low-calorie sweeteners in general, they do highlight that habitual low-calorie sweetener consumption during early life may have unintended long-lasting impacts that are related to metabolism.
Yeah, and when you think about it, a lot of that is present in our so-called energy drinks that form a great deal of problems for adolescents who love to run on that energy. And
right. Well, I'm seeing it now in these newfangled alcohol drinks, because there are a lot of people who are on paleo diets, and they're on paleo diets, or they're on keto diets, and they're told you can't have any carbohydrates at all, but they still want to drink alcohol, which is so bizarre to me. It's like that doesn't add up somehow. But okay, so there are these weird drinks out now that are alcoholic. They have alcohol, but they don't have any other added sugar, and they're sweet to the taste, supposedly, because I've never tried them. They look terrifying to me. I can't even bring myself to even taste test them. But and they're sweetened with sulfame K or other kinds of and some people say, well, what about using some of the what we call natural sweeteners? There are different kinds of melons and even stevia. And stevia as a whole plant is sweet. It's called sweet leaf because of it, but it's got so many other constituents in it. A whole extracted stevia is lightly green in color. It's not white. So a lot of the stevia on the marketplace is so highly purified. And remember, when you ultra purify something, you lose the other components of it. So yeah, it might taste really sweet, and yeah, it might have 0 or 1 calorie.
But you might have thrown the baby out with the bathwater there.
Exactly. So it's just a reminder, people, that you can't fool Mother Nature. And we want to so much as humans. We want to have our cake and eat it too without any calories. And it's just not the way it goes. We need all the taste. We need pungent. We need salty. We need bland and mild. We need all the taste. We need bitters. We need the different tastes, not just sweet, in order to have a well-rounded diet and a well-rounded palate.
And each one of those tastes activates different mechanisms in the body. So
exactly.
If all you're getting is sweet and you're avoiding bitter because, I hate the bitter taste, interestingly enough, bitter stimulates the liver to help cleanse itself and to create bile and to help eliminate things from the body and to help you digest better, which is why many cultures in Europe and in Asia have bitter drinks that they'll take either as a pre-dinner digestive or a
post-dinner. Exactly. So all those different tastes are really important. So not just salt and sweet. And Americans we become so tunnel vision. It's like, oh, we want the salty or we want the sweet, but there are other tastes. There's bland, there's I call it mild,
And actually crunch is not a taste. So
crunch is this texture. and there's bitter, and there's pungent. Pungent's another one that's really, ginger is pungent, and pungency has the ability to open things and kind of disperse things, which sometimes when things become congealed in the body or closed down, you need something to open them up, so all those tastes are important.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So
that's me and sweet.
That's you and sweets. And it really is important because it seems like every 6 months we see another new artificial, let's call it for what it is, Even
Yeah.
though it's natural, they can put natural because it's coming from some natural ingredient. It's not just a chemical compound that was created in a test tube.
Right.
But as Nan pointed out, and I want to point out a little bit too, when you because it's going to lead right into what I want to talk about,
Oh, excellent.
is the fact when you highly concentrate an herb, to go for just one compound within that herb, you have eliminated, if you will, all of the stopgap safety measures that nature has probably put into that herb to allow you to, not take too much. And that's why for me, highly standardizing, highly processing something, and there's Nan's doggies saying hello to her. Yes. When you highly process something, it's problematic because suddenly your body doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't have the checks and balances. And so what I'm going to lead right into here is another article. And this article is actually coming out of it's from a publication called The Insider. And so even the name is interesting enough. They, alluding to the fact that this is inside information. And that's wonderful. But it basically says, turmeric supplements can cause liver damage, doctors say. And this was in October 28th of 2022. Now, it's a federally funded research group identified 10 cases since 2011 in which patients developed liver problems attributed to turmeric supplements. Now, I want to stop for a moment right there and say that turmeric over the last 11 years, because that's between 2011 and now, turmeric has become much more in the mainstream press, not only as a spice, but as a beneficial herb with, many times hepatoprotective qualities to it and things that are doing things that are very good for the liver. Now, as science is wont to do, many, many drugs have been developed from isolating what they think is the active constituent of a plant or a fungus and so on. And then they just highly, highly concentrate that and give it to you. And absolutely, it's going to have an effect in the body. It would probably have the same long-term effect. But, if you're looking for speed is of the essence, then concentrating that. So what's happened with turmeric over the last 11 years is that it's gone from being a whole spice to something called curcumin. And curcumin is one of the compounds in turmeric, and there are hundreds of compounds in turmeric, literally, that are responsible for all of the different things that turmeric can do. So you take that into consideration, and you take the number of people as the popularity of turmeric has been increasing. You look at the number of people taking supplements. And when you say, well, we've identified 10 cases out of how many hundreds of millions of doses, if you will, of turmeric, this is not a huge, oh my God, take turmeric off the market. People are dying in droves of liver failure. It's an interesting anomaly. In 2019.
Well, we have no idea what else they're doing. If they're on other, prescriptions, or if they're doing, God knows what, other drugs.
Alcohol consumption, other drugs, high stress levels.
High stress
Are they
levels.
drinking enough fluid?
Is there bioperine in the curcumin product? Because it may not even, like you said, Tom, it's probably not whole turmeric. It's probably curcumin with bioperine, which is a completely different thing. Has a much more drug-like effect.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because when you label something as, okay, this is a turmeric supplement,
right?
Now across the board, any and all turmeric supplements are now suddenly suspect, not just highly, highly, standardized curcumin.
Right.
And literally, you say clinical evidence doesn't support turmeric use to treat or prevent any disease, one doctor said. So, I think that it's probably highly likely that you can go out anywhere in the United States and find one doctor to, make a statement that would be definitely anti every supplement you could possibly imagine, plus anti every herb you could ever imagine, even if those herbs were used as a source for a drug that the doctor would then be prescribing. So to me, what I'm saying about this study is, while it bears looking at, it's sensationalized. And so, because the title of the article is "Doctor Says Trendy Turmeric Supplements Can Cause Liver Damage and Urges Americans to Know the Risks." You know?
So stop eating Indian food right now.
Quit eating it. And then there, what they go on to say is that, liver damage from turmeric supplements in the US, though still rare, appears to have increased in the recent, even though they don't give the number, 11 years. With, probably thousands and thousands more people taking turmeric supplements.
Yeah.
So again, that was
How about tens of thousands?
Yeah, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands. And basically, and that's increasing every year because of turmeric's popularity and of more and more information, more advertising. So they identified 10 cases in which patients, mostly middle-aged white women, and those are generally the primary buyers in health food stores, is middle-aged white women. And a lot of times those middle-aged white women are buying for the idea of, I want to lose weight. And doing liver detoxification, doing liver support has been shown to be very beneficial in helping people to lose weight, because it can really work with the fats in their body, the way their body stores fats, the way their body stores sugars. So it stands to reason that this is what would happen. But they've developed, those 10 cases, developed a range of liver problems that the doctors then attributed to turmeric. And 5 of those patients were put into the hospital. Doesn't say how long they were hospitalized or whether they were just put in for observation overnight and released the next morning. It just says they were hospitalized, and one of them died. To which is why I was talking to Nan before the show. Yeah, and I know that there are people who eat a strawberry and they can go into anaphylactic shock. Or I had a very good friend who was allergic to mushrooms. And if he had a pizza where he accidentally ate a bit of mushroom on that pizza, he'd go into anaphylactic shock.
Anaphylaxis.
And you don't say, okay, that's it. Pull all the mushrooms off of every pizza in the United States. We had one person die in 11 years.
And it can happen. You're right. I mean, I have a client who's allergic to cinnamon. Mm-hmm. Who would have thunk, but it happens. We're seeing allergies increase, and severe allergies increase in the United States because gut permeability is so poor. I mean, we have so much, it's termed leaky gut, but basically our small intestines are so poor because our diets over a long period of time are poor, but we also have, a lot of chemicals, in our food, in our diet, and it can cause issues with the small intestines. So then you end up with you're leaking large proteins, which your immune system tags. And then next thing you know, you're allergic to something like cinnamon. And turmeric, and it can happen. Black pepper, it can happen. It can happen.
And again, as Nancy pointed out, and I point out too, when you concentrate, when you take an herb and you look at one compound within that herb, then you say, I'm going to highly concentrate that. So BioPerine is a concentrate of black pepper. Now, it's unfair to say, oh, they took black pepper and turmeric and they had liver injury. Again, 10 over the past 11 years. That's highly small amount. That's really tiny amount.
But it's still a problem. I mean,
it's something to look at. But like Nancy said, was there alcohol involved? Were there lifestyle changes? There's so many.
Were there other prescriptive drugs involved? Because there are a lot of people who are on prescriptive painkillers. Sometimes people take turmeric because they're in pain, but they're also on painkillers. So they're thinking, well, I have painkillers, but I still have pain. So why don't I take the turmeric? Not a good idea. If it's curcumin and BioPerine, it's going to increase the efficacy of the painkillers. So that's a bad mix right there.
So again, the idea that you want to be careful is absolutely the bottom. For me, that's the bottom line here, is work with someone who knows what they're doing. If you really are concerned with what's going on in your body and you have an issue that you really want to address, find a qualified healthcare practitioner. Now, from Nan and I's point of view, that includes naturopaths and integrative pharmacists and integrative medical docs who have taken the time to learn about this rather than getting maybe 5 hours worth of education on supplementation during your medical school. And that was it. 5 hours, maybe not even that much. So again, a little, take it with a pinch of salt, but not concentrated salt. Because, it's being talked about like, well, we're combining turmeric with piperine, and piperine is really, it's a black pepper extract. Piperine,
right?
Yeah, piperine is one of the compounds in black pepper because it comes from the piper family.
Yes.
And so it's an interesting, not quite enough information because it makes from my point of view, it just paints this big broad brush picture of all turmeric is bad and all black pepper is bad. Don't do it.
And supplements and herbs are unregulated. Again, it's like you're right. It's a hit piece. It's supplements and herbs. So supplement companies, the most reputable ones, they are CGMP, which is the exact same standard that pharmaceutical drugs are made in manufacturing. They are held to the exact same standards that your pharmaceuticals are made of. Okay, people? Yeah. So it's like it's like not like that.
Yeah, I mean, because if you read this article, you read down into the body of the article where they're already saying, okay, because supplements are sold as natural therapies, they're perceived as safe. Combining supplements should be done with caution as the interactions are not well studied. There's a whole book on herbs of commerce that talks about herb-drug interactions. Known herb-drug interactions, and it's constantly being updated.
A trained clinical herbalist will know their known drug interactions, and I am a stickler for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And basically they go on to say, that the Food and Drug Administration doesn't require supplement sellers to prove efficacy or establish standard safe doses. I'm sorry. That's when the BS light goes beep boop beep boop beep boop. It's like so doctors told Insider that consumers need to recognize that the lack of strict regulation meant supplements could pose as yet unidentified health risks. So, it's still the same old story. Vitamins don't work. Don't take them. Only now they've changed it to vitamins are unsafe.
Are dangerous.
Don't take them.
Yeah, it's not really like that.
And to take it to the final conclusion here. So what they're saying is the amount of turmeric in supplements can range from 500 milligrams, which is usually one capsule. And that's quite a bit. If you're just taking just turmeric by itself, that one capsule, that's a substantial serving of turmeric.
And it's usually curcumin.
Yeah,
so it can be 500 milligrams of curcumin.
And upwards to 8 grams. That's 8,000 milligrams, which would be the equivalent of 16 capsules of turmeric. That's a lot of turmeric. I mean, and again, they're saying turmeric because
they're calling turmeric, but it's
more than likely it is going to be curcumin, or even if it's just powdered turmeric, then the question becomes, okay, because admittedly, what you pay for what you get. So there are companies that are fly by night, they're garage type companies, and they're just
why would you take 8 grams of powdered turmeric all at once? You have to be out of your mind. Yeah. You'd have steam coming out of your ears. You couldn't possibly do it if you were tasting it on the tongue, which is the point of spice herbs. Anyway. Anyway, that's a really good Naturals in the News headline, Tom. Yep.
Yeah, and
all right. Are you done? I'm sorry.
Are you done? I'm done. Yes.
No, I didn't mean it that way. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was so rude. I didn't mean it that way. It just came out of my mouth. Okay. Typical, no filter.
I'll lick my wounds later. That's okay.
I didn't mean it that way.
You know what? Go on to your next one because it'll segue perfectly. I'll feel better if I hear chirpy birds.
Okay. So anyway, all right. So the reason why I just said, are you done, is because I just wanted to pick up the pace here a little bit and give you something very positive to think about and talk about. There's a headline that we found in Psychology and Psychiatry. It was published in October 27th, 2022. Feeling chirpy? Being around birds is linked to lasting mental health benefits. And I love this because, one of the things that happens in the winter is that the bird song kind of just gets very quiet.
Yeah.
Unless you have cardinals.
Well, they migrate.
All right, right. But we do have winter birds here in Massachusetts, and thank God for them because, sometimes the silence is lovely, but, months and months of silence is really hard. That the sound of birds just kind of really makes your heart happy. So the research was done at King's College of London and a very reputable university at that. Seeing or hearing birds is associated with improvement in mental well-being that can last up to 8 hours. This improvement was also evident in people with a diagnosis of depression, the most common mental illness in the world, indicating that potential role of bird life in helping those with mental health conditions. So you're not just a bird brain, okay?
Yeah. And you're not bizarre if you walk outside and you hear the birds and you think, wow, that's
and
so
you think,
lovely.
oh, that sounds so good. So published in Scientific Reports, the study used smartphone application Urban Mind to collect people's real-time reports of mental well-being alongside their reports of seeing or hearing birdsong. Lead author Ryan Hammond, research assistant at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience at the King's College London, said there is growing evidence on mental health benefits of being around nature. And we intuitively think that the presence of birdsong and birds would help lift our mood. However, there is little research that has investigated the impact of birds on mental health in real time and in a real environment. By using the Urban Mind app, we have for the first time showed the direct link between seeing or hearing birds and a positive mood. We hope this evidence can demonstrate the importance of protecting and providing environments to encourage birds, not only for biodiversity, but for our mental health. So, and I love that because one of the things that's such a bummer for me going into the winter season is the birds go away. My hummingbirds go away, and they're noisy little things, and all the songbirds. But we do have cardinals, and we do have woodpeckers, and we do have some hardier birds that will stick around, especially if you put twigs with berries outside near your home. They'll come closer to your home, or bushes that have berries, red or purple berries. They'll come around and they'll sing for you if they have food. So I just am reminding people that winter is hard up here in the higher latitudes, not just because of the cold weather, but the bird song goes away, and we can have a lot of overcast days. And so it's pretty lovely when you encourage birds, not just with bird feeders, but with like natural shrubbery and things that they like to eat in nature in your environment. And then you can hear them sing all year round. Now I'm done.
And having been talking recently with a very dear friend in Hawaii, it's really fun to listen to the background, because I lived in Hawaii for 10 years. And so there are characteristic birds that, the turtle doves and so on, the myna birds and so on, that you hear in the background. And it just, I can actually say, hearing it in the background, it's like, oh, that makes me feel really good. I love hearing those bird songs. And I feed birds in my backyard along with feeding honeybees. I'm one of those weird nature lovers that loves to feed honeybees and feed the birds, and not just hummingbirds, but all kinds of birds. And I go crazy when I get a random oriole that shows up. And, a lot of birders will understand this, that, there are apps that will help you identify what bird is singing. It's like, oh, what's that? I've never heard that sound before. And you've got an app that would tell you, yeah, okay, that's a crested nuthatch or things like that. You're like, wow, okay, I didn't even know they were in this area. So they do make you happy. And this is why it's, again, from an herbalist point of view, it can be very, very problematic when you start hearing about the loss of species.
Yeah. And songbirds especially.
Songbirds especially. Yeah. And that
Yeah.
is, interestingly enough, tied in with the loss of insects. And the loss of insects is tied in with the high use of insecticides, which is
Exactly.
also tied in with the loss of pollinators. And so it's a vicious circle that we just really want to remind people, before you spray, before you, rake all those leaves up and burn them. And, sometimes it's wonderful to leave. There's like a lot of sites right now we're talking about. There's a lot of bees and pollinators that live in the ground. And in the fall,
they need that cover.
They need that cover. And that,
They
so,
do.
you just let it. It's like, one of my favorite people, Paul Stamets, is got a really nice saying about, as far as the woods, it's just let it rot. Let it rot.
Let it be.
Let it
Let it be. Let it be.
Yeah, that's a much better lyric than let it rot. But
I know. Let it be.
Yes, but that's the idea, is that, nature has its own recycling process, and if we start interrupting that, there are other consequences. So we're going to go back to gloom and doom. Because it just happens that there are just a bunch of these articles that have come out, and I'm fascinated by some of them. One of the things that we're fascinated by is the gut bacteria and all of the research on the microbiome that's coming out, because the microbiome is like, it's one of the new frontiers of research. It's like, wow, there are so many billions of different entities that live in our gut, that live on our skin, and each one of them has a potential impact. In fact, they have a very definite impact on our health. And get out of balance, your health is going to go one way or the other. And what they've found is that there is a particular type of gut bacteria that lives on your mucosal membranes. And it is something that is capable of predisposing people to rheumatoid arthritis. And what's interesting about this is not the fact that, okay, my gut bacteria could be attacking me and giving me rheumatoid arthritis, but the fact is that they have now identified that there could be this connection between this particular bacteria and rheumatoid arthritis. And I found that the testing was quite interesting. Okay, so I'm going to read this, because this is, it's under the heading of discovering a new bacterium. So the researchers, and this is from let's see, what is that? The University of Colorado School of Medicine. And basically what the researchers did, with the help of a group led by a Dr. Bill Robinson at Stanford University, took the antibodies created by immune cells from individuals whose blood markers showed that they were at risk for the disease rheumatoid arthritis. And they interestingly enough, they mixed those antibodies with feces of the at-risk individuals to see if there was a bacteria that was tagged by those antibodies. In other words, if the bacteria is tagged by those antibodies are trying to get rid of that bacteria because they're trying to protect the body.
Right.
And rheumatoid arthritis can be where those antibodies go overreacting.
Yeah,
and you get a highly inflammatory process going on in the body, because it's the body's way of saying, we've got to get rid of this. We've got to get rid of this.
Right.
So by mixing it with the feces, basically that's bringing out all kinds of other bacteria that you've got in your intestinal tract. And they're looking at, okay, did one of those bacteria in the feces, was it the target of all those antibodies? And they found that, yes, it was. It actually was. So to further test their hypothesis, the researchers used animal models to host the newly discovered bacteria. Those experiments showed that not only did the bacteria cause the animal models to develop the blood markers found in individuals at risk for rheumatoid arthritis, but some of the models showed development of full-blown rheumatoid arthritis as well.
That's an amazing study. And that's really
it's a
interesting.
Brilliant way of looking at it.
Yes, because a lot of people think, well, that's okay, my colon, and, I poop every day and whatever. But we recycle so much stuff from our large intestines. So mixing it with the feces is smart, because guess what? We're kind of a closed fermentation tank here. Even in the case of, excretion through fecal matter, a lot of it gets recycled. So that is really interesting and really a case for a lot of purification practices.
Yeah, and it was actually published in Medical Express, which I love to get. We get a lot of our naturals in the news from Medical Express. So you go to medicalexpress.com, and this was published in October of 2022. This is really interesting because the collaborators of a research institute that was connected with this confirmed that the T cells in the blood, these are immune cells, the T cells are immune cells in the blood of people with rheumatoid arthritis will respond to these bacteria. So they recognize, okay, I got to get rid of this bacteria. But people who are otherwise healthy and they don't respond to these bacteria, their immune system doesn't respond. So they don't have a genetic predisposition to this.
Or a tag for it, or the immune system hasn't tagged it. Yeah.
And so these studies, through studies in animal and human models, they were able to identify that these bacteria as being associated with the risk of developing rheumatoid arthritis. So now it's not a cure. It's not we found a cure for rheumatoid arthritis, but what they found is, wow, this is interesting. Can we, rather than giving a broad spectrum antibiotic, which will kill off all kinds of different bacteria, can we look at targeting just this one bacteria that's problematic for these people? Now, it's not problematic for everybody, but there are people who are genetically predisposed to respond to this bacteria. Is there a way to say, okay, can we approach getting rid of this one bacteria, or downregulating this one bacteria?
Or downregulating or reducing the colonies of it by crowding it out with other beneficial bacteria.
By encouraging the growth of more beneficial bacteria that will take over real estate that it could be occupying. So that, to me, that's really a fascinating study. It's really great news that, yes, we have, like we're finding for depression and everything else, there's a bacteria for that. There's a pill for that. There's a bacteria for that. and so there's a gut microbiome that is now being taken into consideration. Fascinating.
Yeah, really great. There's so much research in that world of microbiome. It's pretty cool. Okay, one more naturals in the news headline, and then we'll let you go and finish out your year. So I wanted to share this because there's so much conversation about collagen and elastin, and should I take collagen, and what do I need to keep my connective tissue healthy, not just the skin, but of course, a lot of people are worried about their skin as they age. But again, this is all connective tissue. What is connective tissue? Skin, tendons, ligaments, ends of bone, periosteum, wrappings around muscle, fascia. And someday we're going to talk about fascia. But let's talk about silicone that is found from Equisetum arvense, which is, of course, horsetail. This is a randomized controlled trial. It was published in Plant and Medicine in 2022, November. And it basically wanted to look at silicone accumulation. So silicone's really a really important mineral for the formulation of collagen fibers and elastin fibers. So let's see. Equisetum arvense tea, which is horsetail tea, contains high concentrations of silicone, has been used in folk medicine for the treatment of inflammatory ailments. We examined the resorption of silicone after tea consumption. Safety and immunological effects were secondary outcomes. A monocentric randomized 3-armed pilot study was conducted with 12 voluntary healthy male subjects. The study is registered in the German Register for Clinical Trials, and after a low silicone diet of 36 hours, the tea of horsetail that had 1,000 milliliters with approximately 200 micrograms. 200,000 micrograms of silicon. So that's about 200 milligrams, with approximately 750,000 micrograms of silicone, was ingested on 3 consecutive days. Blood and urine samples were collected at baseline. Day 1, examining silicone kinetics. Day 3, examining silicone accumulation. And day 8, safety parameters. So what they found was the immunological parameters didn't show any significant changes indicating immunosuppressive effects, but the tea was well tolerated, and the tea did have increased silica in the urine. So there's some indication that if you drink horsetail tea, that you will increase the silica in your tissues. So more studies to follow. That was a very small pilot study, but we're going to start to see more German research on horsetail and its ability to affect the connective tissue in the body, which it was always used for. So, okay.
All right.
That's it.
That's it. And so, you're probably wondering who we are if you're just tuning in. And if you are, thank you so much for tuning in. Please keep coming back. We do a lot more than just naturals in the news. We do have some wonderful interviews with guests who range, across the spectrum in the natural products industry and in, research and so on into human health and longevity.
Yes, definitely. We have naturals in the know and our favorite things, and we do different segments to just continue the deepening knowledge of natural health and healing.
Yeah, and we're very grateful to all of you who have been following us. Please, if you're new, click that follow and like button. Let us know that you appreciate what we're doing. It's always amazing. Thank you. As you may have been wondering, Nan has had, complementing alternative health and herbal clinic for more than 30 years. And she focuses on very difficult to treat conditions and has also been a spokesperson and an educator in the natural products industry for well over 27 years. She's kind of laid that aside now to concentrate on her clinic and expanding her clinic and expanding the number of people that she's working with. So, she has just a wealth of knowledge, and she is one of those rare individuals who is able to synthesize knowledge from across multiple spectrums in order to benefit the people that she's working with. So keep your eye on Nan in the future. She's got some wonderful things coming out in the way of courses that you can actually. So this is kind of a premiere. A little like, beep boop, beep boop, warning. Nancy is coming out with a beautiful course.
Beep boop, beep boop.
Yeah, Nancy's coming out with a beautiful course that I think everybody would be very fascinated by. So that's our lovely Miss Nancy.
Oh, thanks, Tom. And Tom's herbal background goes way back to 1970 in Hawaii, where he was an organic farmer and worked with local physicians making fresh organic juices for their patients who were very chronically ill. And he saw amazing things using food as medicine. Absolutely. Since then, and for the past 30 years, he's worked for two very large and well-known companies as their herbal educator and trainer. And he's will be a new grandfather very soon, daughter having baby. And it's pretty exciting. We're really, really happy for him and his expanding family. And soon Tom also will have his own app and course that you can download and take part in the coming 2023. We have a lot that we're excited about for the upcoming year, a lot to share, and a lot that we're just continuing. We love doing our podcast, as we said earlier, and we're really glad that you're here, and we thank you so much. We are very grateful for all of you. We'll be doing this podcast still twice a month. I don't know, we might do more, but right now twice a month is what we can squeeze in. We're going to share our perspectives of natural health and healing. We're going to interview key people and thought leaders in the natural products industry to hear their knowledgeable perspectives. And if you don't mind, please subscribe to and like our Facebook page our Instagram, and we actually have YouTube, and I post also on TikTok for people. Please share our podcast with interested friends and family, and let us know if there's something you'd like to hear. We really want to talk about things that you're interested in, and the only way to know that is for you to make comments and
reach out,
give us
reach out,
reach out, let us know. We really are interested. Okay, all right, thanks everyone.
All right.
And
happy holidays to all
and
of you,
have a
and
wonderful new year. Be safe. See you in 2023. Okay, everyone, until next time, I'm Nan.
And I'm Tom.
We'll have more great topics and guests in the very near future. So join us right here in 2 weeks as the Supplement Super Sleuth
And the Herbal Storyteller take another deep dive into the fascinating world of the natural products industry.
See you later.